For those of you who have been watching my channel for a while, you've probably noticed I have a bit of a bias towards Apple. Yeah. Isn't that weird? The reason I'm always defending Apple products is because I think the best technology typically falls under their brand. It's not necessarily me being blindly loyal to them, it's just everything they do makes sense to me, usually. And a lot of people over the past couple of videos have been saying I would defend Apple no matter what they did, and I'm here to say no company is perfect. Apple is not perfect and they make mistakes. There's a whole list I could go into, but I've narrowed it down to 11. Why not 10? I don't know. Don't ask things like that. It's 11. Just be fine with that. This video, I'll be ranking some of my biggest issues with Apple from the least most important to the most important. Not really importance, just what bugs me the most. So let's start with number 11. The keynotes since the death of Steve Jobs have felt very cluttered to me. They include a bunch of stuff that doesn't need to be there. Like at the iPhone 7 unveiling, we talked about Mario and we talked about Pokemon Go for like 40 minutes. And it's like, we know what we're there for. Why can't we just start with the thing everyone's looking forward to? Why do we have to drag it out so long? Don't they understand that the build up to that moment has already taken place over the past week? We don't need even more build up as the keynote's happening. Just get to the point. Don't have all this fluff. Number 10. In Apple Music, you can still access Connect, Apple's attempt at a social network for music lovers. Their second attempt, actually. iTunes Ping happened a while ago. Yeah, that didn't work at all. You know, there's this recurring trend I've noticed with social networks. No social network was big and successful intentionally. It's always a tiny little startup that a lot of people notice and then it blows up and becomes popular. There's never like a giant corporate enterprise that makes a social network that everyone starts using. You know, like Facebook. It's a bunch of kids messing around in college, and then it happens to be the most successful thing of all time. Just blows up, now everyone has one. Or like YouTube. That's where we are, right? It's a little startup, it gets kind of big, and then another company buys it out. So Google bought it, and now it's Google owned. Instagram was a little startup that started to blossom, then Facebook bought it. Same with Snapchat. It's always these tiny little startups that happen to explode. I've never seen a company say, this is the social network, this is the one we will all use, and then that one explodes and gets big. It doesn't happen. And I feel like after this many times, Apple should just say, you know what? We're not good at this. Let's stop trying to make social networks. I love you, Apple, but you as well as other companies need to start realizing that you can't forcefully make a social network and have it be successful. Just look at Google Plus. You had to tether it to YouTube so that you could trick people into thinking it was popular. Not cool, Google. Number 9, the Mighty Mouse. Apple still sells the Mighty Mouse on their website and app. You can still tether it to a purchase of an iMac or Mac Pro. The Mighty Mouse has like the trackball. What? Why is this still here? You discontinued the cinema display, but you've kept the Mighty Mouse? What? And it's still $50? What the? No! Get rid of that. They just forget it's there or something? Someone needs to tell them this. Number 8, the camera app and frame rate resolution. So there's this really handy thing when you're doing slow-mo video on your iPhone. You can tap whether you want it to be 240 frames a second or 120 frames a second. And just by tapping that little frame rate button, you can switch between how slow you want your footage to be. But when you're in regular video mode, you can't do that between 60 frames a second and 4K or 30 frames a second at full HD. And I feel like that's a real missed opportunity. You can easily just tap it and switch to a different resolution. The only way to change it now is to go into the settings app, photos and camera, switch it in there. It's really complicated and it could easily be a very handy feature that they haven't thought of. I feel like that's a huge missed opportunity and I'd love it because I could switch between 4K and 60 FPS very quickly, which would be handy and save a lot of time. Number 7, forgetting to port things over to other platforms. So like your iPhone has a lot of apps that your iPad doesn't have for some reason. The weather app, why can't the iPad have that? I don't know. Or like the stocks app. They've decided that all iOS devices that are an iPhone need to have a stocks app on them for some reason, but they don't want to put the stocks app on the iPad. Why not? It would be great to have all that information on a big screen. Same with weather. Also, it's frustrating to me that the iPad Pro does not have a raise to wake feature. I know it has the graphics processor to do that. I know it has the motion core in it. All I'm saying is if my Apple Watch can do raise to wake, why can't the iPad? I've gotten really used to it on my iPhone and I love that. So let's just port that over to the iPad, please. Thank you. That'd be great. Number 6, Beats headphones. I don't like them and they're owned by Apple. So I don't like Beats. They're too expensive. They don't sound that great. Number 5, message effects in macOS. So with iOS 10, we got these really enhanced changes to messages so that whether you're on an iPhone, iPad, or Apple Watch, you can view messages with an animation. You can slam the text down, you can give it invisible ink, send it with a loud effect, or you can send screen animations with like lasers or party effects, all kinds of things like that, but they haven't added it really on macOS. They added a couple things like invisible ink with the mouse, but like you can't see the screen effects on macOS OS within the messages program. I mean, Macs have Intel quad cores and graphics cards and processing power. I feel like if the Apple Watch can play back a slam effect or a confetti effect or whatever, shouldn't the Mac be able to handle that? Plus, we have like a Force Touch trackpad now, so you could even send those special iOS 10 animations with your Mac if you just force pressed on the send button. I feel like this is really simple and they've missed an opportunity there. The Apple Watch is the most underpowered Apple product there is. If that can do it, the Mac should easily do it. Please fix this. Number 4, naming things wrong. This is more of an OCD thing than anything, but it's very noticeable. Like for instance, at the last keynote, they decided to have a 13-inch MacBook Pro without a touch bar, just function keys, because they knew people really liked the 13-inch MacBook Air. So they kept the MacBook Air and didn't change anything about it, but then made a MacBook Pro without a touch bar that's cheaper and less ports, and it's like, just call that the MacBook Air. Why do you have to have 3 versions of the MacBook Pro? And keep the old MacBook Air that still doesn't have a Retina display, still has those gray bezels and a real clicking trackpad and those keys, and just update the MacBook Air. You don't have to have 3 of the other versions. Same with the iPad Pro. I wish they would have called the 9.7-inch version iPad Pro. Why didn't they call that iPad Air 3? Then you could have mid-ranged Airs, the smaller minis, and the Pro. You don't have to overcomplicate this. Now you have 2 versions of the Pro, Air and Air 2, which are more like the Pro 9.7, and now every time I have to talk about the iPad Pro, I have to specify what the screen size is. Whereas we could have just said iPad Air 3. That would have been way easier. Same with like Apple Watch. We all thought they were going to call it the iWatch, and then they didn't. They decided to call it the Apple Watch, but then we keep iPhone. They didn't want to transition to Apple Phone, so I don't know why they incorporated their name into the watch, but not the phone. There's a lot of inconsistency when it comes to naming stuff. 3, Apple is very brave, but they're not brave enough. Here's one of the things I think Apple is failing at. They want to be the forward-thinking company. They want to have things prepared for in the long run. That's why they're removing so many ports, and a lot of people are not happy about that, including the headphone jack on the iPhone 7 and even more on the MacBook Pros, which we all know I'm in favor of. But they kept the headphone jack on the MacBook Pro because they figured some professionals actually need the optical jack, whereas iPhone users are more casual. They don't need all those special devices for listening to audio. And you don't hook up your phone to professional stereos all the time. I think they should have just gotten rid of the headphone jack because they're trying to acknowledge we need to remove this thing. Instead, include a USB-C to headphone jack adapter if you truly believe professionals will need that. Yes, have a dongle. I don't care that I have to have another dongle. Whatever. Just include that instead of having the headphone jack on your new product, but not the new iPhone. That's confusing. And they weren't up to switching the iPhone to USB-C. And Apple started this whole USB-C thing. I know the Pixel Chromebook was one of the first devices to have USB-C, but no one really bought Chromebooks. The first game-changing USB-C laptop was the 12-inch MacBook. I know Chromebooks have grown more popular than MacBooks now, but at the time of that Pixel Chromebook with USB-C, that wasn't the mainstream laptop. MacBooks still actually did stuff. Whereas Chromebooks, it's like, why do you need that many ports? You're not transferring footage. It's a browser with a keyboard. The 12-inch MacBook brought up USB-C and barely anyone had heard of it. And I think Apple's trying to move everything to the last port, like they've shown on the MacBook Pros. But I think the reason they didn't want to move USB-C to the iPhone was that they were getting rid of the headphone jack and making everyone lose their old Lightning chargers, and having those not work anymore was too much of a hassle. They figured people would be angry enough about the headphone jack as it was, so let's keep the Lightning charger for this year. If I was in charge, I wouldn't have let that happen. I would have said, no, we're Apple, we decide what people use. I don't care that you're all using Lightning chargers. I'm one of them. I have like 20 Lightning chargers in my room. I'd say the iPhone 7 is moving to USB-C. Absolutely none of your ports or cables will be compatible with the iPhone 7. You're buying a whole new thing. Yeah, I'm that kind of a jerk. I would have done that. If I had the choice, I'd also update the iMac to have nothing but USB-C. Get rid of the optical jack on the iMac. Get rid of the Ethernet. I don't care. Nothing but USB-C, because that is the last port that can do everything. And yes, you're buying adapters. That's what I do. I think that's even more brave because you know you're dealing with even more haters than before. I just feel like everyone hates Apple already, so stop trying to please everyone Apple. Just be a jerk. The Apple sheep are gonna buy your stuff anyway. Number 2, colors do not match on everything. So we got kind of the silverish look on iMacs. We got a mirror look on Mac Pros. Now with the MacBook Pros, we have space gray and silver. With the iPhone 7, we have matte black, silver, gold, and rose gold. And with the 12-inch MacBook, we have that same color. And with the iPad Pro, we have a rose gold version with the 9.7-inch, but not the 12.9-inch, which is like, wait. So personally, I think matte black is the best color Apple has right now. It's very sleek, it's very dark, it's low profile, and I love it, but they didn't bring that to the MacBook Pro, which I think would have been really cool. And it would just be really nice that since we're gonna have this whole Apple ecosystem, why not have all of our devices matching in color? It's like when they were designing their products, they went with color schemes from the current model and weren't preparing for their partner's model coming later that year. So the new MacBook Pros were made to match with the 6S, but then the 7 came out, so now they don't match. All I'm saying is I I'd love a matte black iPad. I'd love a matte black MacBook Pro, and even an iMac that's matte black would look sick. So I'm just telling Apple, kind of coordinate. Talk to your other departments and make sure what colors are we gonna have at this point in the year, and then make sure at that point in the year everything's matching. That would help a lot. And number one, this is my biggest annoyance, and it's a small one. No, it's not pricing. No, it's not that they're cash grabbers. I know they are. The Apple Watch says it cannot support video mode in the camera remote app, even though you can see through that setting camera mode is supported. So here's the story, okay? I wanted to film some of my tech videos on my iPhone 7 just to see what the quality would look like. Problem with that is, though, when I have my camera set up like this, I can't see the display. And right now with my DSLR setup, I like to see what I look like on the screen to make sure it's still recording, make sure my head doesn't get cut off. So my thought process was, maybe with the Apple Watch Series 2, video mode will be supported. That way I could have a remote to check to make sure I'm in the shot, it's still recording, and I could even start and stop recording from the watch. That'd be a handy feature, right? Well, every time I switch to video mode, the Apple Watch says this mode is not supported, and you can see it working in the background. A 16:9 video playback, even while it's recording on your watch. And if they would just get rid of that and add the start and stop button, video mode would be supported. It's like they don't realize this is happening. I can't think of an explanation as to why that's not allowed, and it would change the way I do things constantly, and it could potentially help me film things with my iPhone, including these tech videos. It's like running a 5K marathon and quitting at the last 100 feet. Apple, you're so close to making this work. Just push it a little farther. Just get rid of that alert that says video mode isn't supported, because it is. You're literally showing me that it is. All right, that's the top 11. So of course, Apple is still my favorite company out of all tech companies. There's no one I think that does it better, and I think there's no one that gets all the things I listed today better than Apple does, because no one can really support an ecosystem as big as Apple's is. No one has a very capable smartwatch, phone, tablet, laptop, desktop, and TV setup. But no, Apple is definitely not perfect, and personally, I don't think they're a company that's gonna last forever. No company really does. There's not a company that can last for eternity, and I think at some point in my lifetime, Apple will go off the deep end, start doing things I don't think are smart. They haven't got there yet, but I think they will, and one day I might see myself become a sheep of something else. I know this is very depressing for a lot of you to hear, but at some point in this century, I feel like Apple's gonna stop. So there you go, Apple haters. Have my words of ammunition to use against all those Apple sheep. Those are mine, but just remember, right now, Apple is bae. This is your Apple sheep here, and I will see you in the next one.